The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, and it changed everything humanity thought they knew about the universe. Linda Murray was drinking her third cup of coffee when the call came through. She was the head of Earth's newly formed Space Communication Division, a job that had seemed mostly ceremonial until that moment. Now, as she stared at the decoded transmission on her screen, she realized that everything was about to change. The message came from something called the Galactic Council. According to the transmission, this was a governing body of 47 different alien species that had been watching Earth for the past 200 years. They had satellites hidden throughout the solar system, monitoring stations on the dark side of the moon, and observation posts scattered across the asteroid belt. Humanity had never noticed any of it. The alien who delivered the message was called High Counselor Zethrak. He was a Velothian, a tall creature covered in shimmering scales, with 3 sets of eyes that blinked one after another in a way that made Linda feel slightly sick. His voice had been translated into English by some kind of advanced computer system, and every word dripped with contempt. "We have completed our assessment of your species," Zethrak announced in the recording. "Your technological development has reached an acceptable level for first contact. However, your constant wars, your destruction of your own environment, and your inability to unite as a single people have disqualified you from membership in the Galactic Council." Linda felt her stomach drop as the message continued. "You are hereby classified as a protected species under Council Statute 47B. This means you will remain confined to your solar system until you demonstrate the maturity required for galactic citizenship. Any attempt to travel beyond your boundaries will be considered a violation of galactic law and will be met with appropriate corrective measures. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification." Transmission ended with coordinates for a response channel, as if the Council expected humanity to simply accept their judgment and go back to fighting amongst themselves. Linda picked up her phone and called Admiral Chris Porter. Chris was 63 years old, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had served in 3 wars and commanded naval fleets across 2 oceans. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he had thought, until Linda played the alien transmission for him. "Protected species," Chris repeated, his voice flat. "They're treating us like endangered animals in a nature preserve." "It gets worse," Linda said. "They broadcast this message to every planet in their network. The entire galaxy knows that Earth has been classified as too immature for space travel. We're a joke to them." Chris was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold and hard. "Then we need to stop being funny." The news of the Galactic Council's message spread across Earth within hours. Governments tried to control the information, but in the age of the internet, secrets did not stay secret for long. By the end of the first day, the transmission had been viewed over 2 billion times. By the end of the first week, protests had erupted in every major city on the planet. People were angry, but more than that, they were united. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth faced a common enemy. The old conflicts suddenly seemed petty and pointless. What did border disputes matter when the entire species had been dismissed as primitive children? The United Nations held an emergency session that lasted for 3 days without a break. Representatives from every country argued and debated and shouted at each other, but in the end, they all agreed on one thing. Earth would not accept the Council's judgment. A new organization was formed, called the United Earth Defense Coalition. Admiral Chris Porter was appointed as its military commander, and Linda Murray was named as Earth's official ambassador to any alien civilization they might encounter. Their mission was simple: prove the Galactic Council wrong. Dr. Samuel Wright received the call on a rainy afternoon in Geneva. He was a physicist who had spent the past 15 years working on theoretical faster-than-light propulsion, a field that most of his colleagues considered a waste of time. His funding had always been limited. His research had been dismissed as impractical dreaming now. Everything was different. "Dr. Wright," said the voice on the phone, "this is General Patricia Hayes of the United Earth Defense Coalition. We need you to come to Washington immediately. Your research has just become the most important project on the planet." Samuel arrived at the Pentagon 2 days later and was immediately escorted to a secure underground facility that he had not known existed. Inside, he found a team of over 200 scientists, engineers, and military officers, all of them waiting for him. "We've studied everything we could learn from the Council's transmission," Patricia explained as she led him through the facility. "Their ships use something called fold space technology. They bend the fabric of space around their vessels to create shortcuts between 2 points. It's how they travel between stars." "I'm familiar with the theory," Samuel said. "It's elegant, but it has limitations. The energy requirements are enormous, and the process is slow. A ship using fold space would need hours to travel between star systems." Patricia nodded. "That's what we thought. So here's my question, Dr. Wright. Can you do better?" Samuel was quiet for a moment, his mind racing through calculations he had been working on for over a decade. A smile slowly spread across his face. "Now I can," he said. "But I'm going to need resources." "A lot of resources. You'll have everything you need," Patricia replied. "Every government on Earth has agreed to fund this project. Money is no longer an obstacle." Samuel looked around at the assembled team, at the advanced equipment filling the facility, at the determined faces of the men and women who had gathered to help him achieve the impossible. "Give me 2 years," he said. "I'll give you the stars." The Galactic Council forgot about Earth almost immediately after sending their message. To them, humanity was just another primitive species, one of thousands scattered across the outer edges of the galaxy. The Velothians had more important things to worry about: trade agreements with the Krethian Syndicate, territorial disputes with the Orvane Empire, the endless bureaucratic machinery of interstellar government. High Counselor Zethrak occasionally thought about the small blue planet and its troublesome inhabitants, but only as a minor annoyance. The humans would rage and protest for a while, he assumed, and then they would accept their place in the galactic order. Just like every other species before them, he was wrong. On Earth, work continued in secret. The world's brightest minds had gathered together for the first time in history, united by a common purpose. They worked 18-hour days, sleeping in their laboratories, pushing themselves to the limits of human endurance. Failure was not an option. The fate of their entire species depended on their success. And slowly, piece by piece, they began to build something that would change the galaxy forever. Linda. Murray visited the research facility once a month to check on the progress. Each time, she was amazed by how much had been accomplished. The scientists had developed new materials that were stronger than anything that had existed before. The engineers had designed engines that could generate more power than entire cities. And at the center of it all, Dr. Samuel Wright was working on something he called the Pierce Drive. "We're not going to bend space like the Council does," Samuel explained during one of her visits. "We're going to punch a hole straight through it." Linda raised an eyebrow. "Is that safe?" Samuel laughed. "Probably not, but it's going to be fast." The first successful test of the Pierce Drive happened 18 months after the Galactic Council's message arrived on Earth. It was 3 months ahead of schedule, and it changed everything. Captain Daniel Brooks sat in the cockpit of the experimental vessel Horizon, his hands steady on the controls, despite the fear running through his body. The ship was small, barely larger than a fighter jet. It looked nothing like the elegant vessels the Council used for space travel. It was all sharp angles and thick armor plating built for function rather than beauty. "Horizon, this is Control," came the voice of Dr. Samuel right through the communication system. "All systems are showing green. You are cleared for the first Pierce jump." Daniel took a deep breath. "Understood, Control. Initiating Pierce Drive in 10 seconds. He had volunteered for this mission knowing that it might kill him. No one had ever punched a hole through space-time before. The math said it should work, but math and reality did not always agree. For all anyone knew, the Horizon would simply disappear into nothing, taking Daniel with it. But someone had to be first. Someone had to take the risk. And Daniel had decided that someone would be him. 5 seconds, he announced. 4, 3, 2, 1. Pierce Drive engaged. The universe twisted around him. For a single moment that felt like an eternity, Daniel existed everywhere and nowhere at the same time. He saw stars being born and dying, galaxies spinning through the void, the entire history of creation playing out before his eyes. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. He was floating in space near the orbit of Pluto, billions of kilometers from where he had started. The journey had taken less than 4 seconds. "Control," Daniel said, his voice shaking with excitement. "It works. It actually works. 1,000 on the far side of the solar system." The cheering that erupted from the control room could be heard even through the static of the long range. "Communication system, the celebrations on Earth were brief. There is too much work to be done. The Pierce Drive was just the beginning of humanity's plan to prove themselves to the galaxy Decander." Lisa Grant had been a Navy pilot before a training accident damaged her leg and ended her flying career. Now, she ran the Weapons Development Division at a classified facility hidden beneath the Rocky Mountains, and she approached her work with the same aggressive creativity she had once brought to aerial combat. The Council's defenses are designed for a specific type of warfare, Lisa explained to her team as they gathered in the main laboratory. They fight with energy weapons, lasers and plasma cannons, and particle beams. Their shields are optimized to stop that kind of attack. She pulled up a holographic display showing a Council warship. It was a massive vessel, 10 kilometers long, covered in weapons and defensive systems that made it look almost invincible. "But here's the thing," Lisa continued. "No one in the galaxy uses kinetic weapons anymore. They consider them primitive and inefficient, which means their shields aren't designed to stop physical impacts." She pressed a button, and the display changed to show a small metal sphere no larger than a basketball, streaking through space at incredible speed. "This is what we're calling the Hammer system. It's a railgun that launches tungsten projectiles at a significant fraction of the speed of light. Each shot carries more kinetic energy than a nuclear bomb." The simulation played out on the screen. The tiny human projectile struck the massive Council warship and punched straight through its shields as if they were not there. The impact vaporized nearly a quarter of the alien vessel in a single instant. The room was silent. "The Council thinks we're primitive," Lisa said with a cold smile. "Let's show them what primitive really means." Earth's first interstellar warship was completed exactly 2 years after the Galactic Council's message arrived. They named her Defiance, and she was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The ship was massive, nearly half a kilometer long, but she carried no energy weapons at all. Instead, her hull bristled with electromagnetic railguns, missile tubes loaded with fusion warheads, and launch bays for dozens of unmanned combat drones. Her armor was made from materials that had not existed 3 years ago, and her Pierce Drive could take her anywhere in the galaxy in a matter of seconds. Admiral Chris Porter walked through the corridors of the ship on the day of her launch, inspecting every system, talking to every crew member. This was his vessel, his responsibility. He wanted to make sure everything was perfect. Linda Murray found him on the bridge, staring out at the stars through the forward viewport. "You ready for this?" she asked. Chris did not turn around. "I've been ready since the day they called us a protected species." The Defiance launched from Earth orbit at midnight, Universal Time. There were no crowds watching, no celebrations or ceremonies. This was a secret mission, known only to a handful of people in the highest levels of government. The Council believed humanity was still confined to their solar system, still arguing amongst themselves, still decades away from developing interstellar travel. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Velothian outpost at Kroner Station was located at the edge of Council space, far from any major trade routes or population centers. It was a monitoring station designed to watch for threats from the unexplored regions of the galaxy. The crew of 47 aliens considered their posting boring and uneventful. That changed in an instant. Defiance dropped out of Pierce space, 30 kilometers from the station without any warning. The Velothian sensors, which were designed to detect the energy signature of fold space travel, registered nothing until the human ship was already there. Station Commander Velthus had exactly 12 seconds to feel confused before the first rail. Gun rounds struck his facility. The tungsten projectiles moved too fast for the eye to follow. They punched through the station's shields, shattered its hull plating, and destroyed 3 patrol vessels that had been docked for resupply. Velthus managed to send a single distress signal before a second. Volley reduced his command center to burning debris. Defiance did not stay to survey the damage. The Pierce drive hummed to life. Space twisted around the ship, and she vanished as quickly as she had appeared. The attack had lasted less than 30 seconds. News of Kroner Station's destruction reached High Counselor Zethrak within hours. He stared at the damage reports in disbelief, his 3 sets of eyes blinking rapidly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. "This is impossible," he said to his advisors. "The humans cannot have developed interstellar capability. Our projections said they were at least a century away from fold space technology." "They did not use fold space," replied science advisor Methril, a Krethian with pale blue skin and nervous tentacles that writhed constantly. "Our sensors recorded no fold space signature at all. The vessel simply appeared from nothing. Then how did they travel between stars?" Methril's tentacles twisted with anxiety. "We do not know, High Counselor. Their propulsion method is completely unknown to us. It appears to be something entirely new." Zethrak felt a cold fear spreading through his body. The Galactic Council's power was built on technological superiority. For 10,000 years, no species had developed anything that the Council did not already possess. The idea that a primitive world, a protected species, could create something genuinely new was supposed to be impossible. "Find them," Zethrak ordered, his voice hard with anger and fear. "Find their home system and send a fleet to remind them of their place." He turned to stare out the window of his council chamber, looking at the stars that his people had ruled for millennia. Humans need to learn that no one defies the Galactic Council. A council fleet that arrived in Earth's solar system was the largest military force. Assembled in over a century, 200 warships emerged from fold space near Jupiter, their elegant hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. At the center of the formation floated the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, a vessel so massive that it could have swallowed a small moon. Fleet Commander Thraxis stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, studying the human system with contempt. He was a Velothian warrior who had commanded fleets for 300 years, and he had never lost a battle. The idea that these primitive creatures could pose any real threat was almost amusing to him. His sensors showed the defensive positions around Earth. A few dozen small vessels orbited the planet, along with some orbital weapons platforms that looked like they had been built in a hurry. It was pathetic, really. His fleet could sweep aside such defenses without breaking a sweat. "Open a communication channel," Thraxis commanded. "I want these creatures to hear their fate before they die." The communication officer worked his console, and a moment later, Admiral Chris Porter's face appeared on the main view screen. The human looked calm, almost relaxed, which Thraxis found irritating. "Humans of Earth," Thraxis announced in his most commanding voice, "you have committed an act of war against the Galactic Council. Your unprovoked attack on Kroner Station killed 47 Council citizens. For this crime, you will be punished." Chris Porter said nothing, just watched with that strange, calm expression. "Surrender your vessels and submit to Council judgment," Thraxis continued. "Do this, and we may show mercy. Resist, and your planet will be reduced to ash. You have 1 hour to decide." Chris smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "You know what's interesting about humans, Commander?" Chris said. "We're really good at math. We calculated exactly where your fleet would emerge from fold space, down to the meter. We've been watching your approach for 3 days now." Thraxis felt a chill run through his scales. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that right now. Your entire fleet is sitting in the middle of the largest minefield ever created by human hands. Explosions began 3 seconds later. The mines had been placed weeks ago, scattered across the region of space where Council ships always emerged from fold space travel. They were small devices, almost invisible to sensors, but each one carried enough explosive power to cripple a warship. 47 Council vessels were destroyed in the first 10 seconds. Another 60 were damaged so badly they could barely maneuver. The beautiful formation that Thraxis had led into the system dissolved into chaos as ships tried to escape the killing field while more mines continued to detonate around them. All ships raised shields and returned fire. Thraxus screamed, but there was nothing to fire at. The mines were automated weapons with no crews to kill and no ships to destroy. They simply floated in space, waiting for targets to come within range. By the time the surviving council ships had fought their way clear of the minefield, they had lost over half their number. 153 vessels reduced to debris, including some of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, all destroyed by simple explosive devices that the Council had considered too primitive to worry about. And then Defiance arrived. The human warship dropped out of Pierce space directly in front of the surviving Council fleet, and she was not alone. 15 more human vessels appeared alongside her, each one bristling with weapons that the Council had never seen before. "This is Ambassador Linda Murray," came the voice over the emergency communication channel. "Your fleet has been neutralized. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be escorted to Earth for negotiations." Thraxus stared at the human ships, his mind struggling to understand what had happened. In 300 years of military service, he had never experienced anything like this. His fleet, the pride of the Council Navy, had been shattered by creatures who had been classified as primitives just 3 years ago. "You cannot do this," he said, his voice cracking with disbelief. "The Council will send more ships. Thousands of ships. You cannot possibly win against the entire galaxy." "Maybe not," Linda replied. "But we can make you bleed for every light year. We can make this war so expensive that even the Council will think twice about continuing it. Is that really what you want?" The silence stretched for a long moment as Thraxus considered his options. He could order his remaining ships to attack, but he knew it would be suicide. The human weapons had already proven they could punch through Council shields like they were made of paper. His fleet would be destroyed, and nothing would be gained. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "The same thing we've wanted from the beginning," Linda said. "Respect." Captured Council officers were treated well, much to their surprise. They had expected torture and execution, the standard treatment for prisoners of war in most galactic conflicts. Instead, they were given comfortable quarters, good food, and access to communication systems so they could contact their families. Admiral Chris Porter personally visited Fleet Commander Thraxus in his holding cell a week after the battle.
Why are you treating us this way?"
Thraxus asked. "We came to destroy your world. We would have killed billions of your people without hesitation." Chris pulled up a chair and sat down across from the alien commander. "Because that's not who we are. We fight when we have to, but we don't enjoy causing suffering. And right now, we need you alive and healthy so you can deliver a message to your Council." "What message?" "That we're not your enemies," Chris said. "We never wanted this war. All we wanted was to be treated as equals, to be given a chance to prove ourselves. Your Council refused to give us that chance, so we had to take it by force." Thraxus was quiet for a moment. "You really believe you can force the Council to accept you as equals?" "I think we already have," Chris replied. "This battle proved that our technology is superior to anything the Council possesses. We can strike anywhere in your territory and be gone before your defenses can respond. We can make ourselves so expensive to fight that even your massive civilization will feel the cost. And if we simply decide to destroy your planet regardless of the cost?" Chris leaned forward. "Then we'll make sure that destruction goes both ways. We've already identified the locations of every major Council homeworld. If Earth falls, so do they. Mutual destruction isn't victory for anyone." Thraxus studied the human's face, looking for signs of bluff or deception. He found none. This creature, this primitive from a backwater world, was completely serious about his threat. "You're insane," Thraxus said. "All of you. Your entire species is insane." Chris smiled. "Maybe, but we're also free, and we intend to stay that way." High Counselor Zethrak received the news of the battle with a mixture of rage and fear. 200 ships lost, the greatest military defeat in Council history, and all because of a species that had been classified as too primitive to matter. His advisors urged immediate retaliation. Send more fleets, they said. Overwhelm the humans with numbers. Destroy their planet and scatter their colonies before they can grow any stronger. But Zethrak was not a fool. He understood what the battle had really shown. The humans had technology the Council did not possess, weapons the Council could not defend against, and the willingness to use them without hesitation. A prolonged war would cost millions of lives and drain resources that the Council could not afford to lose. And then there was the threat that Fleet Commander Thraxis had relayed. The humans claimed to know the locations of every major Council homeworld. If they were telling the truth, and Zethrak had no reason to believe they were lying, then any attack on Earth could result in devastating counterstrikes against Velothian cities, for the first time in 10,000 years. The Galactic Council faced an enemy they could not simply crush with superior force. Contact the humans, Zethrak finally ordered. Tell them we are willing to negotiate. His advisors stared at him in shock. High Counselor, you cannot be serious. Negotiating with protected species? It would set a dangerous precedent. Every primitive world in the galaxy would see it as weakness. Perhaps, Zethrak replied, but the alternative is a war we might not win, and that would be far more dangerous than any precedent. He turned to look out the window at the stars, the same stars his people had ruled for millennia. These humans have earned the right to be heard. Let us find out what they have to say. High Counselor Zethrak traveled to Earth personally for the negotiations. It was an unprecedented move. In the entire history of the Galactic Council, no High Counselor had ever visited a planet that had been classified as a protected species. The very idea was considered beneath the dignity of the office. But these were unprecedented times. His shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere on a warm summer morning, escorted by a human fighter craft that kept a respectful distance. Zethrak watched through the viewport as the planet's surface came into view. A patchwork of blue oceans, green forests, and sprawling cities that glittered in the sunlight. It was beautiful, he had to admit. For a primitive world, it had a certain raw charm. The shuttle landed at a facility near the ocean, a gleaming building of glass and steel that the humans had constructed specifically for these negotiations. Ambassador Linda Murray was waiting on the landing pad, surrounded by guards who watched Zethrak with barely concealed hostility. High Counselor, Linda said, her voice polite but firm. Welcome to Earth. I hope your journey was comfortable. It was acceptable, Zethrak replied. Shall we proceed to business? I did not travel across the galaxy for small talk, Linda smiled. Of course. Follow me. The negotiation chamber was a large room with windows overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. A long table sat in the center. With chairs arranged on either side, Zethrak took his seat, his scales shifting color slightly as he tried to hide his nervousness. Linda sat across from him, flanked by Admiral Chris Porter and Dr. Samuel Wright. Before we begin, Zethrak said, I want to make something clear. The Council is willing to discuss adjustments to Earth's status, but there are limits to what we can offer. Full membership is not possible. Your species does not meet the established requirements. Linda shook her head slowly. With respect, High Counselor, we're not interested in adjustments. We're not interested in special exceptions or revised categories. We want full and equal membership in the Galactic Council with all the rights and responsibilities that come with it. That is not possible, Zethrak repeated. The requirements for membership have existed for 10,000 years. They cannot be changed for a single species. Then change them for everyone, Linda replied. We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking you to reconsider a system that was designed to keep new species under control rather than help them grow. Zethrak's scales flushed with anger. You know nothing of galactic politics. The requirements exist for good reasons. Species that cannot manage their own internal conflicts are not ready to participate in interstellar affairs. And yet here we are, Linda said calmly. 3 years ago, we received your message telling us we were too immature for space travel. Today, we have technology that makes your fold space drives look like children's toys. We defeated the largest fleet the Council has sent against anyone in a century. How exactly are we not ready? The silence in the room was thick with tension. The Pierce drive, Zethrak finally said. That is what this is really about, isn't it? You want to trade your technology for membership, Linda nodded. Partly yes. The Pierce drive would revolutionize travel across the galaxy. Journey times would be reduced from weeks to hours. Trade routes that are currently too expensive to maintain would suddenly become profitable. Every species in the Council would benefit. And in exchange, you want us to admit that we were wrong about Earth. We want you to treat us as equals, Linda said. Nothing more, nothing less. Zethrak was quiet for a long moment. His 3 sets of eyes studied the humans across the table, looking for weakness, looking for deception. He found neither. These creatures believed completely in what they were asking for. They were willing to fight and die for it. Perhaps that was exactly what made them dangerous. I will need to consult with the other council members, Zethrak said finally. This decision is too important for one person to make alone. Take your time, Linda replied. We're not going anywhere. The council's deliberations lasted for 6 months. During that time, Earth continued to build its fleet and improve its technology. 3 more council patrol groups attempted to establish blockades around human-controlled space. All 3 were destroyed or forced to surrender. The message was clear. Humanity would not be contained. Inside the council chambers, the debates raged. Some species demanded immediate war, regardless of the cost. Others argued for negotiation and compromise. Still others suggested simply ignoring the humans and hoping they would eventually go away. But Zethrak knew that none of these options would work. The humans had proven themselves too powerful to destroy easily, too stubborn to intimidate, and too ambitious to ignore. The only path forward was to find some way to bring them into the galactic community on terms that both sides could accept. In the end, the Council voted to offer Earth provisional membership. It was not full membership, not yet, but it was far more than any protected species had ever been offered before. Earth would have access to Council, trade networks, diplomatic channels, and scientific databases. They would have a voice in Council affairs, though not a vote, in exchange. The humans would share the Pierce drive technology with the entire galaxy. The agreement was signed on a space station orbiting Earth. In a ceremony watched by billions of beings across hundreds of worlds, High Counselor Zethrak and Ambassador Linda Murray shook hands as cameras broadcast the image to every corner of the galaxy. This is a historic day, Zethrak announced to the assembled crowd. For the first time in Council history, protected species has earned their place among the stars through their own efforts. Earth has proven that they are not primitive, not immature, not unworthy of galactic citizenship. They are simply different. And perhaps that is exactly what our galaxy needs. Linda smiled as she stepped up to the microphone. Thank you, High Counselor. But I want to make one thing clear. We're not here because we earned anyone's permission. We're here because we refuse to accept being told what we couldn't do. Humans have always been that way. Tell us something is impossible and we'll spend every ounce of our energy proving you wrong. She looked directly into the cameras, knowing that countless alien species were watching. The galaxy is changing, whether the Council likes it or not. New ideas are emerging. Old ways of thinking are being challenged. The question isn't whether humanity belongs here. We've already proven that we do. The question is what kind of galaxy we're going to build together. The applause that followed was genuine, from both human and alien attendees. In the weeks that followed, Dr. Samuel Wright delivered a complete technical package for the Pierce drive to a joint research facility operated by the Council. Scientists from dozens of species worked together to understand and improve the technology. Within a year, first Council vessels equipped with Pierce drives were conducting test flights. The impact was immediate and profound. Trade routes that had taken weeks to traverse could now be completed in hours. Distant colonies that had been virtually isolated could now be reached easily. The entire structure of galactic economics began to shift. As distances that had once seemed insurmountable became trivial, and at the center of it all was Earth, the small blue world that had been dismissed as too primitive to matter. Admiral Chris Porter retired from active duty. A year after the treaty was signed, he had never wanted to be a warrior. Not really. He had simply done what needed to be done when his planet was threatened. Now that the immediate danger had passed, He was content to let younger officers take command. He bought a small house on the coast of Maine, where he could watch the ocean and tend his garden and read books without worrying about the fate of worlds. Linda Murray visited him sometimes, bringing news from the Council and stories of humanity's continuing expansion across the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Linda asked him one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "All the people who died, on both sides? All the destruction we caused?" Chris was quiet for a long moment. "I regret that it was necessary," he finally said. "But I don't regret doing it. The Council gave us no choice. They wanted to keep us locked in a cage forever. We refused to accept that." He raised his glass toward the darkening sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. "To the ones who didn't make it, may they rest, knowing their sacrifice meant something." Linda raised her own glass. "To the fallen," they drank in silence as night settled over the earth. 20 years had passed since the day humanity first received the Galactic Council's message, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Ambassador Linda Murray, now gray-haired but still sharp as ever, stood before the full Galactic Council chamber for the annual address. The room was massive, filled with representatives from hundreds of species, and all of them were watching her. 20 years ago, most of them had considered her species too primitive to deserve attention. Now, they hung on her every word. "When we first received your message," Linda began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "you called us a protected species. You told us we were too violent, too divided, too immature to join the galactic community. You laughed at us and expected us to accept your judgment without question." She paused, looking around at the assembled aliens. "You were wrong. Not because we were more advanced than you thought, but because you underestimated what we were capable of becoming. In 3 years, we went from first contact to interstellar warfare. In 20 years, we've become one of the most influential species in Council space. Human scientists have contributed more new discoveries in the past decade than any other species. Human diplomats have helped resolve conflicts that had lasted for centuries. Human artists and philosophers are celebrated across 100 different cultures." Linda smiled, and there was warmth in it now. Not the cold determination that had marked the early negotiations. "We're not here to gloat about our achievements. We're here to remind everyone of a simple truth. No species, no matter how primitive they might seem, should be dismissed without being given a chance to prove themselves. The galaxy is vast enough for everyone. All we ever asked for was the opportunity to show what we could contribute." She returned to her seat as the chamber filled with applause. Even High Counselor Zethrak, who had led the original opposition to humanity, joined in the appreciation. He had learned to respect the humans over the past 2 decades. Even if he did not always understand them, Dr. Samuel Wright had become the most famous scientist in the galaxy. His Pierce drive had revolutionized space travel, and his subsequent work had pushed the boundaries of physics even further. Now in his 70s, he spent most of his time teaching at a prestigious research institute, training the next generation of human and alien scientists. One of his favorite students was a young Velothian named Nethris, whose grandfather had served on the fleet that attacked Earth 20 years ago. The irony was not lost on either of them. Dr. Wright Nethris asked one afternoon during a private tutorial, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Council had simply accepted humanity from the beginning? If they had welcomed you, instead of trying to contain you?" Samuel leaned back in his chair, considering the question. "I've thought about it many times," he admitted. "Part of me wishes it could have been that simple. Many good people died because the Council refused to see us as equals." Nethris prompted. "But I'm not sure we would have achieved what we did without that resistance. Humans have always done our best work when we have something to push against. The Council's rejection forced us to unite, to focus, to push ourselves beyond what we thought was possible. In a strange way, your people's contempt was the best thing that ever happened to us." Nethris's scales shifted color thoughtfully. "That seems like a very human way of looking at things." Samuel laughed. "Perhaps it is. We've always been good at turning obstacles into opportunities. It's probably our most annoying trait. 50 years after the Battle of Jupiter, as it came to be known, humanity had spread across 1,000 worlds. The Pierce drive had evolved into something even more advanced, allowing instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. Human colonies existed in systems that had once been considered too remote to reach, but the most significant change was not technological. It was cultural. Throughout the galaxy, species that had once been dismissed as primitives were finding their voices. They looked at humanity's rise and saw possibility. They saw that the old order could be challenged, that new ideas could triumph over ancient traditions. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was no longer the same institution that had once laughed at. Earth, humans held permanent seats on every major council committee. Human diplomats mediated disputes between species that had been fighting for millennia. Human ideas about democracy, individual rights, and universal equality had spread to corners of the galaxy that had never encountered such concepts before. Not everyone was happy about these changes. Some of the older species resented humanity's influence, viewing it as a threat to their traditional power. There were still conflicts, still tensions, still moments when war seemed possible. But the galaxy had learned an important lesson about the cost of underestimating others, and most species were reluctant to repeat the Council's original mistake. Admiral Chris Porter died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 92. In the same small house on the coast of Maine where he had spent his retirement, his funeral was attended by dignitaries from across the galaxy, including High Counselor Zethrak himself, who had traveled to Earth specifically to pay his respects. He was a worthy opponent, Zethrak said at the ceremony, and an even worthier ally. The galaxy will miss him. Linda Murray, herself, now in her 80s, delivered the eulogy. Her voice was weaker than it had been in her younger days, but her words were as sharp as ever. Chris Porter never wanted to be a hero, she said. He never wanted to fight a war or lead a fleet or change the course of galactic history. He was a simple man who loved his family, his planet, and his species. When the Council threatened everything he cared about, he did what needed to be done. He fought back. And in doing so, he showed the entire galaxy what humanity was capable of. Looked out at the crowd. At the mixture of human and alien faces gathered to honor a man who had helped change the universe, the Galactic Council laughed at us once. They called us primitives, dismissed us as unworthy of attention, tried to keep us confined to our little corner of space. Chris Porter was one of the people who proved them wrong. Not through arrogance or cruelty, but through determination, courage, and an unshakable belief that every species deserves the chance to reach for the stars. Linda paused, gathering herself for the final words. Rest well, old friend. You earned it. The ceremony ended as the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean. The same ocean that had witnessed humanity's first steps toward the stars. Somewhere above, 1,000 human ships traveled between the stars that Chris Porter had helped to open on the Velothian homeworld. In a museum dedicated to galactic history, there was a small exhibit about Earth. It had been created decades ago, after the treaty was signed, and it had been updated many times as humanity's influence grew. A plaque at the entrance read, "They came from a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy." They were told they did not belong among the stars. They proved us wrong. Visitors from hundreds of species stopped to read those words every day. Some came out of curiosity, wanting to learn about the species that had changed everything. Others came for inspiration, hoping to find the same determination that had driven humanity to defy the odds. And still others came as a reminder that the universe was full of surprises, that the greatest threats could come from the most unexpected places, and that no species, no matter how powerful they might be, should ever assume they knew the limits of what others could achieve. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was still exploring it. New worlds were being discovered every day. New challenges were being overcome. New friendships were being formed between species that had never imagined they could find common ground. The Galactic Council had laughed at Earth once. They had called humanity a protected species, a joke, a footnote in galactic history. They were not laughing anymore. And somewhere, in the infinite darkness between the stars, the spirit of human exploration continued to push forward, reaching for horizons that even the oldest and wisest species had never imagined. The journey was far from over. In many ways, It had only just begun. But that was exactly how humans liked it.